We may not think football and maternal health are linked, but ask any of the players, why are you who you are? My mother. My mother. And so it's actually at the heart and soul of the athlete, even if it's not yet at the consciousness of the fan. So the storytelling is where we begun. And right now we're in Brazil. We're in Santos live with our mother community, and we're in Rio de Janeiro. We expand to the US on Mother's Day, May 11th. We're announcing our 3 clubs in San Diego, New York, and Miami. And what we're doing is running a 60-day small mini competition between Brazil and the US.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Health Beats, one of the world's leading international healthcare podcasts, which you can access on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you haven't subscribed by now, why not? We've had some fantastic interviews on Health Beats over the last few weeks. I'm Steve Gardner, I'm the Managing Director of Healthcare World magazine, and I will be your host, as always, joined again, as always, by a really fascinating guest. In this case, it's Morad Fareed, who has been I don't know whether I'm getting this in the right order or not, but an entrepreneur, an investment banker, and squeezed in some time to play World Cup qualifiers for Palestine before moving on to become a crusader for women's health and healthy pregnancy. Morad, you must be exhausted. How do you squeeze all this in?
Oh, no, the work is regenerative. And, everything is kind of cross-pollination at this point. And the dynamic is very nourishing. So it's been a constant learning experience and a creative process.
So tell us how all this kind of came about. I mean, how do you transition from investment banker to entrepreneur to footballer? What's the journey been?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have an eclectic set of interests, and I also think you're meant to try a lot of different things and develop tools that you can assemble later into an integrated, puzzle, if you will. And so I think when I started in finance and investment banking, I pretty quickly realized that wasn't for me. Useful skills, useful tools, but not really for me. And I think as I've gone throughout various challenges and curiosities, it's fascinating now, years later, to be able to look back and see how they've come together.
I mean, firstly, how do you find yourself as a business person living in the States, growing up in the States, getting into playing football for Palestine? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was serendipitous, to be honest. I mean, I grew up playing football. I was, super competitive as a young boy. My team was national champions. I grew up in New York. We traveled around. I played twice a day. I trained before school. I was a young, I thought I was going to go pro up until, puberty hit and middle school hit, and I had other interests. But I always wondered how far I could take football. I played at New York University at still a decent level, but at work one night on Wall Street, I saw a Wall Street Journal article that said Palestine to form World Cup football team. And I didn't even understand what I was reading. I'd never heard of such a thing. There was no existing team. And so this was the first team that was being formed to try to compete at that time for the 2006 World Cup. And it hit me like electricity. I said, oh my God, I have to go for it. I have to try out. And so that kind of clarity of chasing your dreams and trying to see, if you could still do it. Right away, I quit what I was doing, and I spent the next 4 years playing for the team.
That's unbelievable. So literally, you just saw an article in the paper and thought, well, I'm Palestinian. I could play.
It's like the inner child, the inner child, you can't turn that voice off. The inner child is loud.
It's interesting. Years ago, I used to work for a football magazine, and I remember there was a spate of England players resigning from international football. And as a joke, the entire editorial staff, we all wrote to the FA and said, with a letter saying, we no longer wish to be considered for selection for the England national team. So you're speaking to someone who has retired from international football. But the other way round, how do you go about finding the person, the coach, the Palestinian FA person say, "Hey, by the way, I've been in the States for most of my life, but I have
Right.
Palestinian parentage. Can I play?"
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it maybe that's where some of my skills in banking or as an entrepreneur came in because it was an odyssey trying to hunt down, forget the coach, just even hunt down anybody who I could speak to at the PFA or even understand where they were located. So that was a journey in trying to hunt people down, and in those days there wasn't anything available. But yeah, it was a hunt, and eventually one person leads you to another, and then eventually you have to just show up, which is what I did. You just
Yeah,
got to take a one-way flight and see what happens. Because there is no formal process. The Palestine team at that time was essentially a startup with
yeah.
no visibility. It was nobody knew what was happening. There were players flying in from all over the world for tryouts through word of mouth or through some, notification. So it was very, very much no formal process, and you just had to show up.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
And I guess, tell us about that moment when the World Cup qualifier, you come in as a substitute, you make your debut for Palestine. How did that feel?
Oh man, just when you say that, I get goosebumps. It was like, it was the best feeling of my life. As a kid, you dream about that moment.
Mm.
You visualize it more than anything. It's just that moment you visualize, and then you also don't even feel your body. It's a strange feeling. You're running, but you don't feel anything, and it's this out of body kind of pride, joy, and pride, and all the emotions at once.
And what's the one overriding memory? In terms of what was your move? What is the Morad Fareed highlight reel?
Oh man, you got me there. You got me there. I had a few lucky nutmegs that were honestly they looked good, but they were so totally lucky, unplanned, and one of them was right in front of our own goal,
Right.
which yeah. So I
That
looked.
could have gone badly wrong.
And that was not my style at all. It just happened so fast. But that one's in my head a lot. That one's on replay often.
That's the one. That's the one you replay. Always say to anybody playing sport, if you can take that one memory home with you, that one perfect thing you did, that's amazing. And,
Right.
and I guess you look at that tenacity, and you look at the way in which you single-mindedly pursued the idea of playing for Palestine. I guess that probably comes from the entrepreneurial background, but
Right.
also that's presumably been something that's been a huge benefit in your post football career, and the formation of FC Mother and the work that you're doing now. Is that what's fueled it?
Yeah, I mean, when you lock in on something, it's your North Star. And the process to doing it changes every day. The process You're not married to any process. It's whatever it takes, and there's no way around it. And I think great work, great results, great challenges come out of that openness. But it's the paradox of being so focused, but also so open to adapting on a daily basis. So you become obsessed, and you have to be obsessed, and you have to feel that there's nothing more important than the thing I'm doing right now to get to this place that I really believe in.
So how did it come about then? Because I mean, presumably, you experienced the high of your debut in international football. You're then sitting there and going, "What comes next?" And then this is that the process. Is that when this came into your head? And you went, "Yeah, this is what I want to do."
It's interesting. Things are, in retrospect, they're different than they are in the real time. In the moment, it's like you get little breadcrumbs from the universe, you get clues, and you start pursuing them. And one of the clues that I'd gotten was that I was super interested in the built environment and real estate.
And this was your first startup, wasn't it? Was a
Yeah, and that was a company called Delos, which we founded almost 16 years ago now, 15 years ago. And the idea was to take the green building movement that we do for better ecological well being and translate that into human health. So, not just make buildings that are good for the environment, but for people within the environment. And my partner and I had this kernel of an idea that was humans spend 90% of our time indoors. So it was adding this new dimension to the sustainability movement related to human health and buildings. And the idea grew and it grew, and the science validated the idea, and then the research base grew. And before you know it, after about 7 years of tinkering with the idea, we'd formed the largest global research initiative in the world on healthy buildings. And that involved over 350 technical experts. And if you think about it, we merged science, medicine, and health with real estate, construction, design, and architecture.
And that's a fascinating point, isn't it? I mean, I spend a lot of time talking about things like population health, preventative care, the moves of global health systems towards those ideals. And we were discussing this, in fact, only yesterday. That actually, what you do as a health system is only a part of the solution. The social determinants of healthcare are the biggest single drivers of behaviour, of illness, of all of these things. And too often they're the things that get forgotten about. And I guess, on the one hand, you've got healthy buildings, a big social determinant of healthcare. And then with FC Mother, you've got the whole idea of support networks and community. So tell us about FC Mother. What is it? How did it come about, and what are you looking to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe you just said the social determinants of health. I mean, that has been our obsession for the last 15 years. And if you look at human well-being, 80% is social, 20% is clinical. And so everybody's paradigm is focused on the 20% that's clinical or genetic or behavioral. But we know what the data tells us. It's social. And so, as you say, buildings are a small component of that social pie. But the largest determinant of human health, of every single human today, is the fetal period, the 9 months in the womb. And the science on that is very clear. The developmental origins of health and disease link every chronic disease back to the womb, and how mothers are supported, essentially. So mom's social environment is the great golden window to all human health. And the data, the science, the emergent field around that, which has been almost 4 decades old now, is kind of the most obvious thing that nobody's paying attention to. And I got super interested in it because of that reason, right? It's the biggest determinant of human health. If you're working on health, in public health, in longevity, and you're not focused on the biggest determinant, that's weird to me. So it's the largest, most fertile ground for impacts. And then second, we know what to do in pregnancy. It's not like some existential mystery where we have to invent a solution and go to Mars or some moonshot. It's very clear what it is. And we know how to take babies from preterm birth to full-term birth. We know how to go from low birth weight to full birth weight. We know all of these things, that it's about better support networks, lower stress, emotional well-being, community, midwives, doulas, birth workers, and all of the constellation of well-being around mom. And so that really was like, it's very obvious, it's very logical. Why is nobody doing this? And this started about almost 11 years ago now, with this very simple thing like, hey, it's the biggest impact on human health. We know the solution. It's very practical. Less than 2% of the global population is pregnant. It's not a big number. So it's very practical. Why aren't we really bringing solutions, innovation, and distribution to this problem? So that's kind of what the origin and the seed of the FC Mother story is.
So the issue, of course, is that the problem is obvious, but the solution is a little less obvious, because you've got that position where, as you rightly say, the science tells us that certainly the majority of long-term conditions, the majority of defects, if you like, in human health are formed in the womb. And clearly the right environment around a pregnant mother, the right steps to be taken as she's going through that pregnancy, are going to be a massive determining factor in how you do that. But, less than 2% of the population may be pregnant, but their circumstances of that 2% are massively different, depending on your social background, where you are in the world, what access to good healthcare you've got, whether you have a supporting partner or family, whether you have friends around you that you can support you. That's a massively complicated ecosystem
Right.
that you're trying to have some influence on. So how is the
Yeah,
big
I
question?
mean, we hit on the holy grail. It's social, right?
Mm,
And we spent a lot of time setting up centers and programs throughout the U.S.
mm,
And what we found was the power of once a week classes, community circles, mentorship, just solidarity, support, and coaching during the prenatal period had profound impacts. We were able to drop C-section rates by 30% just by doing once a week classes. So the bar is so low.
mm,
Um, what we're trying to say is we're not really in the healthcare
mm,
domain at all. It's about social well-being and social support networks. And so if we know it's not healthcare, we know it's not some technical or technology innovation that's going to be some way to govern this complex social fabric. What is the most powerful social vehicle that we have access to? What is the leading social community? And that's what led us into looking into a creative approach, which is football. And I know it sounds a little weird. What does football have to do with maternal health? But once
mm,
you peel it back, you realize there's something actually here,
mm,
and it's powerful. And so when you look at the problem as social, the solution is social. And then you start mapping out a different kind of well-being, prenatal well-being program, postnatal well-being program, healing program that can
mm,
be linked to the social power of football and the social infrastructure of football clubs specifically.
mm. I suppose if you think about it, certainly I mean, not in every country. I mean, not necessarily, interestingly, not necessarily in the country that you reside in. I mean,
Right.
football in terms of, talk about football in the States, and it's more to do with helmets and pads and a slightly odd shaped ball. But, around the rest of the world where football is such a huge deal, I guess, it's kind of the last bastion of community engagement, isn't it? I mean,
Exactly.
in the UK, I can only use the UK as an example. You go back to the 70s and 80s, and people's social network revolved around the pub,
Right.
and or meeting at the shops or the market.
Right.
I mean, go back in human history, there were always these gathering points for humanity, which I guess is
Right.
where that social interaction would have come. What you're saying is, I guess, that in the modern world, in the probably 75% of the planet, the thing that still brings people together is sport, is football, and that's the communities. That kind of where you're coming from.
It's exactly it. I mean, like you're saying, the town square and the convening points throughout history have been different vehicles. Even the church and religion has been a vehicle, but football is the transcendent town square today. That's humanity's greatest vehicle to convene and unify people and create a coherence. And how football moves is so fascinating. When you actually look at how football takes on issues, once football takes on an issue, the velocity of that issue, the distribution and awareness of that issue, the consciousness is vast. And it's unlike any other. I mean, no government in the world can do what football can do, right? There's no authority that can do it, there's no religion that can do it. And so, what do we have as a collective today that every Sunday we unify around something and we trust in our football clubs. Many of us trust in our football clubs more than our governments.
You
Um,
obviously don't support Everton.
no, I don't.
There you go. I could do a whole podcast on the amount of pain, suffering, and general depression that my football
Right.
club has caused me. And it's really interesting because actually, curiously enough, my background is, as I mentioned earlier on, my first job in media was on Total Football magazine in the
I know
90s.
that's so wild.
And we used to talk a lot about the suffering of the average football fan. That actually, being a football supporter is about suffering.
Yeah,
It's about
right.
following your team every week, and for everybody except one team in the league, that's always going to be
Suffering.
painful because we're all going to go. I mean, I guess the issue is that there is no way that you can draw a parallel between the suffering of the average football fan and what a mother goes through during pregnancy.
Right.
It's apples and oranges. You know, I'm sorry. As depressed as I may be if my team lose on a Saturday, I don't have to go through that level of physiological change.
Right.
So I guess my question though, football, it's changing. It's been changing over the last 20 years, probably. We're now starting to see female professional leagues around the world, and women's football is growing. But it is, and has always been, a traditionally male environment.
Right.
Is there an element here of, by engaging football around maternal care, around pregnancy, that what we're also doing is kind of upskilling the male population to understand? You know, I just drew that parallel there
Absolutely.
between the suffering of the football fan and what a
Right.
woman goes through in pregnancy. Are we going to get them to understand that actually, when you go to the match on a Saturday and your wife is heavily pregnant at home and really trying to deal with that discomfort, you should maybe be thinking about it?
See, that's the brilliance, what you just correlated yourself, and
Mm,
very naturally, right? Like you correlated the suffering of you as a fan of Everton to, is it like the suffering of pregnancy? No, it's not. But this is the power of football. It's a different way to translate maternal health. So you understand it in a different way. If I told you we're losing 38 games in a row at Real
mm,
Madrid,
mhm.
okay, what would happen in Madrid? Right? There'd be a war. There'd be a civil war, right? Like it would be, everybody would be fired. There'd be a war in the nation. Something horrible would happen. But that's what's happening in pregnancy today.
Mm,
It's the largest loss of life years in all of
mm, yeah,
humanity. It's greater than cancer. It's greater than heart disease, than obesity, than diabetes. Is unhealthy pregnancy. It's the largest loss of life years. Nobody knows that. Our lab was the first to publish that. When we published it, I thought the whole world would stop and say, "Oh my God,"
mm,
and nobody cared.
mm,
So, to your point, it is a way to engage people outside of the rabbit hole and the niche who are
mm,
studying this stuff. It's such a small community of us.
mhm,
There's no awareness on this topic. And when there is some awareness, it's in one ear out the other. It's like
mm.
people will hear that data and say, "Oh wow, okay, I guess that's bad." But there's no action item, and kind of deeper understanding. So football helps us do that.
So again, it comes down to how. How do you
Right.
use football to engage? I mean, there's a piece there. You talk about awareness. You know, what
Yeah.
we've got to do is we've got to get the average football fan to be genuinely thinking about the problem rather than going, "Oh, what, largest loss of human life? Yeah, but we need a new
Right.
centre half."
Right. Yeah. So we've taken the health program
Mm,
that we've done. It's a 1,000-day health program. It's led by community health workers. It's validated by our lab. It's from the prenatal period to birth to postpartum and until baby's 2 years old. And we've gamified it. And we measure everything in life years. So the community now has action. So mom's at the center. Okay. Mom's pregnant. She downloads a free app. She gets assigned immediately a midwife, a community health worker, a doula, a mental health therapist, basically a care team. The second thing she does is choose her friends and family she wants playing on her team. The concept is pregnancy is a team sport. Why are we
yeah,
going through it alone?
yeah,
Never in
yeah.
human history has this happened. And I can't tell you the thousands of pregnant women I've met over a decade who are going through this completely alone. And if you look at the number one problem in pregnancy, it's not clinical and medical. It's I'm alone. I don't know who to turn to. I'm suffering. I'm afraid, and I need some support. And so the whole point of this is to provide a whole support network for mom and around mom that's tracked and supplementally funded. So at the core of it, it's public health 101. But to expand it into a community game,
Yeah.
if we can measure healing of a mother, we can measure the healing of a family. which means we can measure the healing of a community, which means we can assign a score to a club. And that's where the magic comes into football. We create a competition between clubs of health outcomes for pregnancy year to year. And that's where it starts to get very interesting because even if the average fan is not initially a huge, hey, who really thinks about this stuff if it doesn't affect them? I totally understand that.
Yeah,
But if your top three players on the team are sharing their mother stories, I want
yeah,
to thank my mother. That's a gateway into them. And second, once you see your badge on a leaderboard, it doesn't matter what it is. You don't want to lose. You
yeah.
don't want to lose. I mean, we've seen gamification in health concepts. They have 50% better outcomes. We've seen any app that gets gamified for well-being, it's stickier. And there's something in the human psyche. I mean, it works on me with all my wearables and stuff like that. It's just instant. And so what we're doing is just applying some of these principles.
So ostensibly, to use a very glib example, instead of that average football fan thinking, "Yeah, but we need a new centre half," you want them to be thinking, "Yeah, but we need a new midwife."
We need a new community health worker for nutrition. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
losing. We're losing here. Our left fullback is injured. We need a replacement. And that's the beauty of it. It's a whole framework that immediately, as a fanatic of football,
Mm.
you start thinking in that language, and that's where the magic is. So it's a public health program. It's a public health standard, but it's a game, and it's all been mapped to football.
To be successful, though, you're going to have to get this adopted. You're going to have to get this engaged with at a pretty high level.
Yeah,
Where are you in that process? What clubs have you got involved?
right.
What high profile players have you got involved?
Yeah.
And where in the world are you having an effect so far?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So, this idea came about 2 years ago, and it was theoretical, and what does that even mean, and how does football really work as a business, as an industry, and what we started doing was finding who the right community of possible partners are before the clubs. So, what we found is the sports doctors of the top clubs, the chief medical doctors of Real Madrid, Man U, Arsenal, formed an entity where they all collaborate on not just elite sports medicine, but public health, community health. And this network and us formed a joint venture to basically say, let's co design this new FC Mother League. Let's have all the maternal health experts, the life years and data health experts, but you guys are going to be the football brains of how clubs actually work and what would work and what wouldn't. So after starting there, we've then set out to basically have, where do we even begin on the club side? Football is so vast and the player networks are so vast. We wanted to start in Brazil with Pelé because he's the founder of football. I mean, to me, no Pelé, no World Cup. No Pelé, no football. And so we were able to shoot Pelé and an honorarium video with his mother and capture her as the first mother of football. And that's begun a whole series that we're now shooting of players and their mothers, male and female players, top
Brilliant.
players, academy players. And it's been brilliant because every single answer is so fascinating. We may not think football and maternal health are linked, but ask any of the players, why are you who you are? My mother. My mother. And so it's actually at the heart and soul of the athlete, even if it's not yet at the consciousness of the fan. So the storytelling is where we begun. And right now we're in Brazil. We're in Santos live with our mother community, and we're in Rio de Janeiro. We expand to the US on Mother's Day, May 11th. We're announcing our three clubs in San Diego, New York, and Miami. And what we're doing is running a 60-day small mini competition between Brazil and the US.
So if you're doing Miami, then presumably Messi's mum and Beckham's mum will be next on the agenda.
We'll see. Fingers crossed.
Giving nothing away at this stage, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, but it's fascinating because we know everything about these athletes, right? Like I don't need another. I mean, I love all the documentaries, but I kind of I pretty much know who Messi is. I know nothing about his mother who created
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I know nothing, and I'm so fascinated about who created the heroic, iconic athletes and the origin story. And so there's a huge, I think, dimension to the storytelling. And what's so fascinating is when you sit down with these guys and you're like, I don't actually want to shoot you at all. I want to shoot your mother. They're relieved because they want to honor their mothers and they get too much attention as it is.
And it's a really interesting point, isn't it? I mean, if you take the great example of David Beckham's wand of a right foot, you know, at the end of the day, had his mother not had, presumably, a reasonably good, sensible pregnancy in Leytonstone in North London, I think is where Beckham was born, then, you know, it could have been that that right foot didn't come out the way that it did and didn't score the goal against Colombia, didn't, put the crosses in to win Man United. It's a really fascinating point when you look at the fact that how do you engage the average football fan? Well, actually, your players came from somewhere.
Right, right. You got to thank their mothers for that sweet left
Yeah.
peg.
Yeah.
And, you got to thank the mothers. And also, who do you think was with them every second, taking them to academy, to training, lifting them up? I mean, ask Cristiano about his mother. He'll go on a, 1 hour intense rant of devotion because his mom worked two jobs as a cleaner so he
Yeah.
could play football. And that's what's amazing is the contribution of the mothers baked into football, and it just
Mhm.
needs to be expressed.
So Ronaldo, is he going to be one of your mother's stories then, Cristiano Ronaldo?
You know how Cristiano is. He transcends any. I think he'll be his own, version of something related to FC
Yeah.
Mother at some point.
But you're right. I mean, I certainly have read interviews where he's talked about the influence of his mother. It's a really interesting point. So at the moment you're in Brazil,
Yep.
which you're talking about certainly in large parts of Brazil, fairly deprived communities where
Yeah.
where I guess this kind of stuff can have an impact. Then in the US, where else in the world are you going to take this community? Are you going to take this story? What's the roadmap?
Yeah. So what's interesting is we have 3 World Cups in a row. It's never
Hmm.
happened. Two were
Yeah,
in the U.S.
yeah,
And so what we're doing is embedding the FC Mother program within the World Cup calendar. We're validating the mechanics right now so that by the World Cup final this July, the Club World Cup in our backyard,
yeah.
we'll be publishing and hosting an event in New York City prior to the final, which will be the introduction of the first season, if you will, the 5 clubs in the FC Mother League. Once that's validated, we'll expand pretty rapidly. I think what's interesting is the mechanics are very simple, and leveraging the scale of the World Cup is the roadmap. So we're looking at 4 or 5 markets right now in Europe, UK, Spain, obviously. We're looking all throughout South America, Canada, Mexico, obviously, as host nation. So for us, it starts with who's a really coherent community health network, and then leveraging the power of football. So we'll do this at the league level, not the club level, and we'll do it piggybacking on the World Cup calendar.
So again, presumably engagement with the national associations,
Yeah, you
engagement
got
with the
it. All
professional
of
leagues.
that, FIFA, the national associations, the kind of top-down entities would be the mechanics. And all of this it's very fascinating. I thought football was this, I played it and then focused on other things. I never knew the business of football. Um, so as big as it is, as massive as it is, it's actually kind of small with how it's, as an industry, it's actually kind of small, surprisingly. So I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting to leverage its scale for scaling up.
And what about the health systems themselves? So you talk about the UK. You're going to engage with the NHS. Are you going to engage with the government, with the healthcare providers?
Yeah, we're in the social well-being domain. We don't get into healthcare. We don't get into birth. We're not in birth centers. You keep your traditional healthcare providers. We're just here to provide extra support on the well-being, emotional, mental health components. So obviously huge collaborations with, midwives, midwifery networks, but the system works well as a supplement, not as a trying to plug into health systems. We've tried that already. It doesn't work. It's very clunky. It's very time consuming, and they're very slow.
But I guess where there are public health authorities that specifically have that remit around spreading public health messaging, looking at screening and preventative care, are those areas that you want to plug into?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the plug-in is the key question, right? It's like as long as it's a correct use of the public health platforms and it's light, because our goal here is to get to all the mothers that we possibly can. It's not about spending 20 years trying to work out the politics of a specific healthcare system.
Point, very reasonable point. You've got to be agile and able to kind of have the maximum impact in the shortest amount of time. So I think the other question that I want to ask is about money, because I think everything in healthcare has to be paid for. Sometimes we don't like to think about it, but money still drives healthcare. And you're doing work in Brazil. Presumably you're going to be doing so in other less wealthy countries and less wealthy environments. Is there a way of, I guess, securing the funding that mothers need in order to complete that team, to get access to the right midwives, the right health professionals, the right communities? Those communities themselves need to be hosted. How do you think about this network from a financial point of view and funding?
Yeah, it's a great question. We spent a lot of time on this part of the equation because if you want to break down maternal health problems, it's very simple. It's distribution and money. So the distribution is football. What's very interesting about the business model is there's two massive pools of capital that are untapped today on maternal health. One is sports sponsorships, 154 billion a year. 54% of that is looking for women. So you have this alignment with sports sponsors. I would call that the smaller pot. The massive untapped pot, though, is donor advised funds in the U.S. 254 billion to 300 billion of already donated capital that is unlocked for any results-based impact financing. So climate, sustainability, space travel, whatever your passion project or impact project is, obviously public health is a huge component of that. The key to unlocking that is having a third-party metric, which is where the life years come in. Our lab was the one to pioneer life years related to prenatal period. We work with a lot of the leading research and academic centers to make sure we have third parties validating life years. So we generate, let's say in Santos, in New York, in Rio de Janeiro, 1 million life years at the end of year one. We get paid per life year, an amount, and we split that amount with our community health workers. So it's a known concept called results-based financing. The money is basically infinite money for results. Those pools of capital are massive and growing. And so that's kind of our answer. It's all third party through results-based financing. The key to unlocking it, though, is the life years. The program has to work. If it works, then we get funded. If it doesn't work, then obviously we don't want to grow, and we don't actually believe the service should exist if it's not effective, right? So that's the model.
So how do you get that cash to the front line?
Yeah, so it's a pretty simple kind of mechanism where donor funds pledge results based on life years. And so it's a donor advised fund that we set up. So FC Mother has its own donor advised fund. FC Mother's lab and lab partners validate life years every year. And then it's a funding mechanism based on pledges. So it's really well socialized in climate. You'll see these schemes in a lot of different challenge areas. So yeah, we're just following best practice, but it's all through our app. So our network of midwives are generating life years. They get paid per life year. And yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is kind of streamlined these days with the power of the app and the power of the donor advised fund.
So I guess where I'm going with this is the connection between that funding, that large amount of funding, that large pot of funding you've got, and a mother who is living in a rundown area of Rio
Yeah,
de Janeiro,
right.
who is pregnant, who doesn't know where to turn for support. How do you get that money to that mother?
Yeah, we don't get the money to that mother. We get the money to that midwife taking care of that mother. So we're doing this right now. It's live in Rio de Janeiro. It's led by an amazing national midwife in Brazil, Dr. Eloisa. And so she's running our app today. She's generating life years based on prenatal care services and healing programs she's doing. Based on those results on a month to month basis, there's an accounting where she then gets paid for her services. So we're assigning free healthcare services, in real life services to mothers, and it's through the professional healthcare workers in the communities.
Right. So
Yep,
basically, what you've got Dr. Eloisa, who is essentially your local coordinator for Rio, and she's getting the money through the FC Mother funding through
that's right.
that scientific based outcome based funding model, and then going, right, okay, I need to find the mothers that need us most. That's how my
That's it.
example mother will get access to that care. And if you've got, presumably with the way that you've got this set up, you've got the stats, you've got the numbers. I mean, can you tell us how many mothers you've managed to provide care to who
Yeah.
otherwise wouldn't have had a midwife? Have you got that level of information?
Yeah, I mean, we just went live in Rio de Janeiro 4 weeks ago. We have, I think, 270 mothers enrolled in Rio. We have 140 mothers enrolled in Santos. We're Our midwife network is now 32, led by Dr. Eloisa. And again, it's meant to be intentionally. It's almost the preseason, if you will. We want to make sure the mechanics work. But what you'll find is the need. I mean, there is no shortage of mothers who want to enroll. It's just about getting the support networks of community health workers enrolled, trained, and socialized on the app so that they understand it. So that's happening pretty rapidly, and it's what's been surprising about it, I would say, how organic it's been. Um, to date, it's been the midwifery networks in enrolling other midwives, and it's been, there's no marketing; it's all word of mouth. And a lot of these groups exist, um, but they just don't have, what we're providing them. And it's fascinating to talk to them because they've been waiting for something like this because they can't get paid for their work.
No, no,
If you
exactly.
ask a midwife anywhere in the world, I mean, almost anywhere, the most universal problem is funding.
No,
And
yeah.
so we're saying we have a third party way to fund your amazing work. All we need you to do is use this app and track it. So that's why the midwifery community has celebrated this the way they have. It's a tool to support their good work, and it's doulas, it's birth workers, it's anybody who's in the community health ecosystem. So yeah, I mean it's fascinating to see the actual users, which are not really the mothers, they're the healthcare providers.
And it's really interesting because we start off with a conversation about kicking a ball around a big grassy field.
Yeah,
Um, and then you start to kind of translate that into it. To me, I guess for me, I've just kind of seen the light in the latter part of this conversation because now I'm seeing the linkage. Because what you've got is you're using, football as the great working class game. It's
right.
the game to which, you know, everybody has, or most of us around the world have that affiliation, no matter what our status in society, to our team and our club and our badge. You mentioned Santos there as one of the big clubs in Brazil. You mentioned Pele, of course, who made his name playing for Santos. All
Right.
of those people in the slums who are at the lower end of society will still have the affiliation with that badge. That gives you the penetration. That gives you the network. It gives you the air of publicity, and then using that to bring the mothers, the community, the midwives together, and then the outcome based funding to bring them the cash to actually do the good work that you need. That's ultimately, have I got that right? Is
You
that the
got it
roadmap,
perfectly right.
what you're
Yes, that's
trying to
exactly
achieve?
it. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that what football does really well, in addition to those mechanics, football celebrates the community. And so we'll be celebrating healthy outcomes. The month of May, which is Mother's Day in the US and Brazil, will be a series of Mother's Day activations every single year. The same way we do for mental health, the same way we do for veterans or any other community health issue. So, in addition to that, it'll become celebratory, not just some invisible problem that's happening in your community that you're not aware of. We're going to celebrate victories. There's fan songs. There's walking out with mothers. There's all types of pregnancy celebrations for goals. I mean, this stuff is happening already when players' wives are pregnant. So it's really just creating a design around it that's a little bit more intentional, a little bit more visible, and celebrating, healthier outcomes. And it's but putting it in the football language, not the health language, is the key.
But this is you're at the very beginning of this, really, aren't you? I mean, you've got Brazil, you're rolling out in the US.
Right.
How far can this go?
I mean, think of the World Cup, and we're calling this the World Cup of Healing. And there's 48 nations that'll compete on the pitch. By the end of next year, there'll be 48 nations competing on healing mothers. And what's fascinating is it's each level up is exponential. It's not linear. There's nothing about football that's linear. The top 10 clubs reach 1.5 billion people. Name me another thing like that on the planet. This is not linear. And so if you look at the power of the football community and then the power of the mother community, mothers are 2 billion people today. Right now, the wisdom of those mothers, those 2 billion mothers, is not being shared with pregnant women. So one of the big things we're doing here is data collection of mother stories to share the wisdom of, past lived pregnancies and advice and support of mother to mother peer networks. So how far can it go? We'll have 400 clubs in 10 years. We'll reach the world through the power of football if we do our job well.
And how are you spending your time? Are you going out talking to high profile players, talking to clubs, talking to associations? How are you personally driving this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I tried being out there a lot, and I think it was valuable to learn the landscape. But now it's like we've gotten enough of the landscape, and it's about designing the system. And now that the system is designed, it's making sure it works, which is the stage we're in. Once it works, it's quantum growth if it works. And that's what's fascinating. What we've proven, McKinsey will tell you if you do everything right for your health, you could generate about 6 life years per human. What we found in pregnancy already in our studies and our pilots is with our midwife partners, we're generating 10 life years per mother-child dyad, largest longevity gains in the world. So we're obsessed with getting this right in terms of making sure it generates the impact of life years. And then once that does, this July, um, we're in a different gear where we're saying, okay, we want to be in 48 nations. We want to be with the football frameworks, associations, top down. And we want to translate this with good local partners. So, I think with the 3 World Cups thing, I really believe this will be an established global game by 2027 when we have the World Cup in Brazil.
So I guess what you're saying there is at the moment you're looking at, you've got the markets that you're in, you've got Brazil as your key, as your test bed. You're making sure it works in Brazil. The structure is
Brazil
there.
and
That
US,
you,
yes.
that you've got the data and therefore the provable data that will allow you to unlock the funding. Once you've made sure the model works, it's like I guess it's like any prototype, right? You're making sure the prototype is there
You got it.
and then looking to roll out. Once you've got that proven model, what are the critical success factors? What's going to help you to make sure this works or stop it from
Yeah,
working? Is it getting players and football associations engaged? Is it getting clinical professionals involved? Is it
great
recruiting mothers?
question.
Is it all of the above?
The top priority is the community health worker networks. These are so challenging on this topic. There's not a coherent support network in a lot of countries. So it's capacity for at the community health worker level And we see that in the United States is so complex. Nobody can scale up anything related to women's health. There's not one high distribution women's health program in the nation. And so it's really at the community health worker level, as that's the impediment. The football side is not an impediment at all. After 2 years, we can confidently say this grows very fast with football. There's not one player, there's not one club, there's not one who said no to mothers. There's not one. It's just, what do you need from us? How does it work? Yeah, as long as it doesn't cost us money, and as long as it's not, you know what I mean? So the football community has embraced it. It's just about the mechanics of the health side that I think is still the challenge to scaling. It'll always be about training up, and we may have some issues, which we expect, on capacity for community health workers on this topic. So there's a whole training program that's also being developed. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the growing pains of any new system, right? It's a system. There are multiple communities and stakeholders. The capacity is not all equal in certain markets.
I guess from the sound of things, you need a Dr. Eloisa in each market.
You got it. It's a coach. Yeah, I mean, in the US, we have our coach of Team USA is Jenny Joseph, Time Magazine Woman of the Year, #1 midwife. She has 409 locations throughout the US. So in the US and Brazil, this is why we've chosen these coaches, these captains. They are the best in the nation in Brazil and the best in the nation. So we need these coaches in every country. They're the national team coach. And that's basically, to put it simply, what the process is.
No, fantastic. And look, I mean, I hope you'll come back and come and join us again on Health Beats. Perhaps bring Jenny and Dr. Eloise with you
Would
next
love
time.
that.
I'd love to hear their stories. But look, from our point of view, from my point of view, I'm sure you hear this everywhere. Support for this program should be absolutely universal. It's a complete no-brainer. There's no doubt about it. Morad, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to everybody for watching as well. And Morad, how can people get in touch if they want to support or they want to get involved in this agenda?
Yeah, we're at fcmother.com, and I'm at Morad Fareed on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Morad, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody for watching.